Put on the Good evening, everybody. Good evening. It is Wednesday again, and it is World History, True Nation World History. Again, my name is Ahman Allah, and I will be going over for you guys and with you guys the history of Israel, the Jews, the Northern Kingdom, Southern Kingdom in the Middle East, or better known in today's terms, Arabia. Also back then as well too, it was known as that. So we're gonna try to do this, like how I like things, as linear as possible. I'm gonna take you guys a little bit into the deeper ancient past history, and then I'm gonna bring you up to speed in some more modern. Well, not necessarily modern, but close to I don't know how you would say, like close current times and everything, like the Middle Ages and such like that. We're not gonna really go too much in the 20th or 21st century. But with that being said, let us begin. So, in order to understand Israel in the Middle East, we had to first, get an understanding of what the Middle East is, what Arabia is, or even what, the term an Arab means. If you would like to know, Arab actually, the word comes from, let me get you the exact etymology right now. So, it's Semitic and Aramaic. It actually means nomadic. So that's what the word Arab, in Arabia means. It means nomadic or moving around. And we're going to see, as far as why we call this region and people that, we're going to see where that originated from in the scriptures themselves. So we can go to the book of Genesis. We're going to go to chapter 16. And we're going to read, we're going to probably jump around a little bit, but we're going to go to Genesis 16 and start from verse 7. So I'm going to give you some just background or backdate with that. So at this point in time, Abraham, our grand, great, forefather, and his wife and his wife's handmaid, Hagar, they decided to have a child before the time that the Most High had prescribed unto Abraham to have Isaac, which is where our lineage and our stock comes from, Israel, so-called blacks, Latinos, Native Americans, and as we're going to find out, others in parts of the world. We come from Isaac, but Abraham and Sarah had decided to jump the gun with Sarah's handmaid, Hagar, and they did their thing and gave birth to Ishmael. So that's the backdrop with that. Eventually, Ishmael and Hagar were told by Sarah to leave Abraham when it was officially understood and promised that, like, oh, the Most High is going to give us a child. He's going to give us future to be Isaac. So let's read this real quick. Genesis chapter 16, read from verse 7, and we're going to pretty much go to like verse 14.
Hold on 1 second.
Con, no problems. So it's going to begin with the angel of the Most High God finding Hagar and her little wee son in the wilderness or a desert area, in a specific area that's very important as far as terming who the Arabs are.
You said Genesis 7?
16 and 7, yep.
Okay, Salakia.
No worries.
Genesis chapter 16 and verse 7. And the angel of the Lord found her by a fountain of water in the wilderness, by the fountain in the way to Shur.
So before we continue on, so that's important to understand dealing with this region. Fountains of waters and this particular area, region rather, called Shur or Shur, which is close to Egypt, close to Goshen, where Israel in the time of Moses had dwelt in Egypt. So continue on.
Verse 8. And he said, Hagar, Sarah's maid, whence camest thou? And whither wilt thou go? And she said, I will flee from the face of my mistress, Sarah.
You can jump to verse 11.
Verse 11, and the angel of the Lord said unto her, Behold, thou art with child, and shalt bear a son, and shalt call his name Ishmael, because the Lord have heard thy affliction.
And read verse 12.
And he will be a wild man. His hand will be against every man, and every man's hand against him. And he shall dwell in the presence of all his brethren.
So part of that prophecy dealing with Ishmael and his descendants as far as being a wild man, you have to consider it actually comes from the origins of what Arab means or what a nomadic person is. When a person is of a wild origin, they're not domesticated in a sense. And the culture of Arab people, they're by definition of the Old English, they're considered wild people because they don't necessarily settle in one particular area. They're always constantly going around, constantly moving around between, different settled areas that have, flourished within the region, but that's what they're known for. The Arabic, the original Arabic people and Arabs in antiquity, like the Berbers, pretty much, I guess, in modern day North Africa and the Sahara Desert, they, had originally came from that same stock too. So that's part of what it means when Ishmael would be a wild man of the desert. He's a nomad or a traveler of the desert. And again, that goes all within their business as well too, that we'll talk about Israel being involved with as well. You can read verse 14.
Verse 14, wherefore the well was called Ber Lahai-roi. Behold, it is between Kadesh and Bered.
So it's important, Ishmael and Hagar dealing with these wells that existed in these wilderness areas. These would be defining Arab peoples and Israel's business ventures as we get into it, later on in the future. Let's go to the book of Genesis, chapter 25 and verse 12. Again, we're just kind of establishing the foundation, a groundwork of the region. And I'm going to give you guys some pictures and everything like that too. Actually, as a matter of fact, before we go to that, let me just, I believe I have a picture of something I want to show you guys right now. Just so you guys can get an understanding of where Shur is, the land of Shur when when the angel of the Lord first found Hagar and Ishmael. So you can see right here, Shur is in this map. It shows it on the very far west side. It's on the very far west side of the Arabian Peninsula, this plot of land between these bodies of water. This is the Arabian Peninsula, if you didn't know. This is where Shur is. And if you actually go more detailed, zoomed into the map, you're actually going to see that Shur itself was around here. And we're going to get that really quick, and I'm going to explain why this is here as well too, as we continue to look at this map. So we're going to go to Genesis chapter 25 and read verse 17 and 18.
Genesis chapter 25 and verse 17. And these are the years of the life of Ishmael, 137 years. And he gave up the ghost and died, and was gathered unto his people.
Which were all his children, which we're going to get into in a second as well too. Verse 18.
And they dwelt from Havilah unto Shur, that is, before Egypt, as thou goest towards Assyria. And he died in the presence of all his brethren.
So verse 18 is very important. Dwelling from Shur unto Havilah, that is before Egypt. You guys should know this is Egypt, classical antiquity Egypt right here. Shur actually begins like right here within the wilderness of Sinai or of Sin, this area, all the way going towards Assyria this way to the land of Havilah. Assyria is along this place right here. This line right here is the Euphrates River, and this is, an important river that connects this side of the upper Middle East to the other side right here. So Assyria, Babylon, Mesopotamia, Akkad, a lot of the ancient Mesopotamian cities all lived within this stretch right here. So again, Havilah is within the regions of the Arabian desert or peninsula from here. So the scriptures match up, as far as our understanding of who and where Ishmael is, and where they've been. So this is their region. And more specifically, the northern region. As we're going to go in, we're going to see that the Middle East actually goes further south, and an Arab person, as far as today's terms, doesn't necessarily exactly mean that they come from Ishmael. There's about two other Shemitic descendants that that Arabs consist of, but Ishmael being the most prominent as far as many details, cities and such like that, and namesake as far as Islam is concerned. So we have that, and we're going to actually get into that right now, what I just said. So let's read into some of the descendants of Ishmael. Go to Genesis 25 and read verse 12.
Genesis chapter 25 and verse 12. Now these are the generations of Ishmael, Abraham's son, who Hagar, the Egyptian, Sarah's handmaid, bare unto him. And these are the names of the son of Ishmael by their names, according to their generations. The firstborn of Ishmael, Nebajoth, and Kedar, and Adbeel, and Mabisam, and Mishmam, and Duma, and Massa, and Hadar, and Tema, and Jatur, and Nephish, and Gedima.
So those, that's 12. Those 12 sons, interestingly enough, sort of parallel to Israel and his 12 sons. But those 12 sons of Ishmael, of those ones in the scriptures, you're going to find one of these particular ones very important, and that's Kedar. Kedar is mentioned in a few places, other places in scripture, such as Song of Solomon and some of these other ones I'm going to bring out. But I want you guys to remember that one, Kedar. And then we're going to go to the other part, what I was talking about, which is some other Arabian peoples that don't come from Ishmael, but they come from Abraham's other wife, Keturah. Go to Genesis chapter 25, and you can read from verse 1 unto verse 6, actually.
Genesis chapter 25 and verse 1. Then again Abraham took a wife, and her name was Keturah, and she bare him Zimran and Jekoshan and Median and Median and Ishbak and Shuah, and Jokshan begot Shebiah, and Dedan. And the sons of Dedan were Ashuram and Letushim and Leumim. And the sons of Median, Ephah and Epher and Hanak and Abidah and Elidah. All these were the children of Keturah.
Okay. In verse 6.
Salakia. And Abraham gave all that he had unto Isaac, but unto the sons of the concubines which Abraham had, Abraham gave gifts and sent them away from Isaac his son, while he yet lived eastward unto the east country.
So at this point, eastward from where Abraham was at was, dwelling place around Canaan. So that being here, Abraham now sends Keturah and their descendants, much like Ishmael, over here. So as far as research goes and concerns, you have Ishmael's descendants dwelling in the upper portion of the Arabian Peninsula, and then you have these other descendants of Keturah from Abraham that actually dwell in the lower portions of the Arabian Peninsula. And this is information that you can get from let me show you the very top, from BibleMaps.com. It goes into this. There's a little section that talks about the southern Arabian tribes and the northern Arabian tribes. And then this information goes into that detail as far as the research they have done on those people. So the groundwork, the groundwork foundations laid with the Arabian Peninsula. These are the people that, this is the land that was allotted to them. Notable places. Now, if you guys didn't know anything about how history goes, generally, back then and today, cities are named after great people, and great people happen to be the fathers that you come from. So remember how I mentioned to remember of Ishmael, one of the sons, Kedar. That was an actual city, or a refuge place, or a camp. Kedar is an important place of economic trade between many of the nations, including Israel, within the Fertile Crescent. The other ones include, from Abraham and Keturah, those descendants, Dedan, and as well as Sheba, and then some other ones, actually, because we didn't go into, I'm not going to really go too much into Esau's descendants, but some of Esau's sons, whose names was Duma and Duma actually was from Ishmael. And then Tema. Tema is from one of Ishmael's sons as well, too. But these particular cities, Kedar, Dedan, Tema, Duma, and those four are mentioned a lot dealing with prophecies in the scriptures of these particular areas, so that we know that these were important places that sustained the world economy, if we can say, back then. You know, they had a major effect on Israel, and Israel had a major effect on them. So much so that the Most High had pronounced judgments to them. So right now, let's actually let's get into some of those actually. So setting the ground frame, we've set the groundwork rather of the Middle East according to scriptures. So let's get to where Israel actually comes involved. Let's get to the book of 2 Chronicles, chapter 9, and I'm gonna jump around in there, and we're gonna see some ancient Israelite dwellings in this area that is gonna hopefully get you to understand what Israel's doing there today, or even 100 and 300 and 400 years ago. 2 Chronicles, let me get that for you guys too. 2 Chronicles chapter 9, and let's read at let's actually, chapter 9 and verse 1.
2 Chronicles chapter 9 and verse 1. And when the queen of Sheba heard of the fame of Solomon, she came to prove Solomon with hard questions at Jerusalem, with a very great company, and camels that bear spices, and gold in abundance, and precious stones. When she was come to Solomon, she communed with him of all that was in her heart.
Con. So right there, we have we're speaking about the Queen of Sheba. And if you guys remember, Sheba was one of the descendants of Keturah, one of the descendants of Keturah and Abraham, and the kids that he sent eastward from where he was at that time. Sheba is identified modernly today with the land of Yemen, which is the southernmost portion of the Arabian Peninsula. So that's where Sheba is. The Queen of Sheba comes from all the way south in the more fertile land, because the southern part of the Arabian Peninsula actually touches the waters, which again is modern-day Yemen. That's where she was from, that particular region. So she's coming up from there all the way up to Jerusalem to speak to Solomon. And she has specific things with her. Most notably, she has spices. Now, these spices are important because we're going to get into speaking about the type of trade that not only Sheba had, but that Arabs or the dwellers in the Arabian Peninsula, descendants of Ishmael and Keturah, what type of business they were involved in, and why they were even considered to be nomadic people. A lot of their work and trade dealt with moving, pushing and moving product, in this case spices, as well as incense. You know, there's two specific routes I want to show you guys. If we can go back to the PowerPoint, it's called the spice routes and the incense routes, and these look like, this. If we want to switch back to the PowerPoint with me, Kanash. So check this out right here. So we see Yemen again on this map. This is where Sheba is. So this is where the Queen of Sheba came, all the way up on, let's say the route was this easy, you know, getting up to Israel's right here. So, you know, to Jerusalem and such like that. Now you're gonna see all these points on here. All these points are pretty much cities, if we want to call them back then, or camps, you know, very large camps. So we'll say cities, you know, cities of antiquity, where you would be able to, being a nomad and all, stop, rest, and travel, because the Arabian desert everything in between here is no joke. It's one of the deserts of deserts, and is actually considered to be, a connected to that desert portion of the Sahara Desert, which is the largest desert in the whole world in the northern part of Africa. It's the same thing. In the majority of this peninsula. But again, closer to the waters in Yemen and such like that, they have a little bit more leeway. It's a little bit easier there. But on these trade routes, we see, it doesn't get too easy. And we're going to probably get into a couple of these. Where here we see Medina. I'm going to tell you guys later on, most high willing with time permit, how important this place is. Petra right here, closer up to Israel, and other places like Gaza and Damascus, all these major points of trade that, bringing it front, back, and center, the Queen of Sheba had made to Solomon up here in Israel. And she brought spices with her. Spices, if you guys remember from the last lesson, was part of came really from India. And India is along this water route going to the Arabian Sea from what we see here, right here, Ezyan Gerber, we'll talk about that too, coming from India. So all that trade coming there, bam, entering Yemen and Sheba and getting brought up to here. So this was the world economy, part of the world economy that was going on back then. And Israel had a part in it, and I'm going to get you guys that information right now. We're going to read the last part in 2 Chronicles chapter 9, dealing with Sheba, all the things that she gave to him. You know what? That's actually good. Read verse 9. 2 Chronicles chapter 9 and verse 9.
2 Chronicles chapter 9 and verse 9. And she gave the king 120 talents of gold, and of spices great abundance, and precious stones. Neither was there any such spice as the queen of Sheba gave King Solomon.
So again, that particular spices was important, trade export for Israel from her, and a situation that continued on, within the world economy back then. Now, as far as Israel being involved with this, we're going to go to the book of Numbers, chapter 9, verse 10 through 14. So, just to preface it off, if you guys don't know anything about Solomon and his, endeavors still, such as with the ships in Ezyan Gerber, what we read about in 2 Kings, as well as 2 Chronicles, oftentimes Solomon and Israel in general sent people to go work with the other nations, within these, foreign lands and such like that. That was a thing. We journeyed and everything. And we had laws for our people that were on these journeys, that maybe were 3 years out in some time, maybe a week or a month's out. We had laws that still pertain to our people with that, because we didn't just stay home in Israel. That was the homeland, but our people lawfully were not just staying at home. We were allowed to do business within, keeping the Most High first and foremost in our mind outside of our homeland. We were doing things like that. Go to Numbers chapter 9, verse 10 through 14.
What scripture was that?
Numbers chapter 9.
Salakia.
It's all right. Verse 10 and through 14.
Numbers chapter 9 and verse 10. Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, if any man of you or of your posterity shall be unclean by reason of a dead body, or be in a journey afar off, yet he shall keep the Passover unto the Lord.
So right now we're just talking about, the ordinance of how important to keep Passover is, as well as the three other feasts where all men are supposed to show up throughout the year, being Pentecost and Tabernacles. Those three feasts are very prominent and important for our people to keep, if they can, back at home. So again, our people, this is a law pertaining to people that, journeyed afar off. You can continue on.
Verse 11. The 14th day of the second month at even they shall keep it, and eat it with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. They shall leave none of it until the morning, nor break any bones of it. According to all of the ordinances of the Passover, they shall keep it. But the man that is clean and is not in a journey and afar off to keep the Passover, even the same soul shall be cut off from among his people, because he brought not the offering of the Lord in his appointed season. That man shall bear his sin.
So this is talking about, again, how important it is, even if you weren't, on a journey, how you needed to be there, in Jerusalem. But still, it was no exception, even if you weren't in Jerusalem and you were on a far journey off, such as caravanning with these different Arab tribes, being on the ships of Hiram and Tyre, out getting gold from Ophir, you were still to observe the Passover, even if you were on those business ventures back then. You would still have to keep these ordinances. But again, these were things that we weren't necessarily excommunicated from. It's just that this is how we obtained our wealth, by dwelling and doing business amongst the other nations of people, rather than just, being in the homeland. To emphasis on that. So now we're going to go into, again, what the scriptures say about these things, about these other cities and these other nations, and why prophecies of judgments of destruction were sentenced against them. We're just going to bring out a couple of them. We can go to Jeremiah 6 and 20.
Jeremiah chapter 6 and verse 20. To what purpose cometh there to be incense from Sheba, and the sweet cane from a far country? Your burnt offerings are not acceptable, nor your sacrifices sweet unto me.
So just we're getting to more details as far as some of these economic things that these other nations provided for Israel, and and the regions at that time. We can go to Isaiah 60, verse 5 through 7.
You said 60 or 6?
60, verse 60, and start from verse 5.
Isaiah 60 and verse 7.
Verse 5, my guy.
So like your verse 5. Then thou shalt see and flow together, and thine heart shall fear and be enlarged, because the abundance of the sea shall be converted unto thee. The forces of the Gentiles shall come unto thee. The multitude of camels shall cover thee. The dromedaries of Median and Ephah, all they from Sheba shall come. They shall bring gold and incense, and they shall show forth the praises of the Lord. All the flocks of Kedar shall be gathered together unto thee. The rams of Naboth shall minister unto thee. They shall come up with acceptance of mine altar, and I will glorify the house of my glory.
So that was more so on, a positive end of the prophecy. But if we go to Isaiah chapter 21, we're going to see more so, some judgments being produced against these nations. So Isaiah 21 and verse 1.
Isaiah chapter 21 and verse 1. The burden of the desert of the sea, as whirlwinds in the south pass through, so it cometh from the desert, from a terrible land.
Now verse 11.
Verse 11. The burden of Duma, he calleth to me out of Seir, watchman, what of the night? Watchman, what of the night? The watchman said, the morning cometh, and also the night. If ye will inquire, inquire ye, return, come.
So a warning for the city of Duma. They was not doing something correct unto the ordinances of the Most High or to Israel. You can switch on the PowerPoint, because as we're reading these, I want you guys to get an image of where these cities are, because we have, again, 3 or 4 rather of the main ones. So right now we just spoke about Duma. This is where Duma is in regards to Israel, and in regards to these red lines. These were the trade routes. These were the routes that Israel and as well as the Arabs made, trekking and journeying to make money, and to trade goods. So again, this was Duma right here. This is this is the proximity of it. So back in Isaiah, so let's go to verse 13.
Verse 13, the burden upon Arabia. In the forests of Arabia shall ye lodge, O ye traveling companies of Dedanim.
And that's right here, Dedan, or the Dedanimites, that's where these people are. You can continue.
The inhabitants of the land of Tema brought water to him that was thirsty. Mm-hmm. They prevented with their bread him that fled.
God.
For they fled from the swords, from the drawn swords, and from the bent bow, and from the grievousness of war. For thus hath the Lord said unto me, within a year, according to the years of a hireling, and all the glory of Kedar shall fail.
So what we're reading about is, in specifics to, or rather Tema in Arabia, it's talking about where it says, for they fled from the swords and from the drawn sword and from the bent bow and from the grievousness of war. This prophecy in Isaiah is dealing with Babylon, with the southern kingdom, with the Jews and such like that. So again, the Most High had initially sentenced that we should bow our necks, to the king of Babylon, and also warned us, saying too, if you guys flee and run away, you guys are gonna get destroyed. So these areas in the Middle East, these are some of the places that in antiquity Jews had fled to and were being abused by these peoples of Tema, Denanim, and peoples of Arabia. So we literally scattered everywhere, because again, why would we go to these places? Before Babylon took over Israel, I would say 200 or 300, 400 years back with Solomon, again, we were doing businesses with these places. We knew these cities and these strongholds in the desert. So it was no mystery for us to be like, oh, we know how to get, we know the route to get to Duma. We know how to get the route to Tema, to Dedan, and places like Medina or Yathrib, and even I'll remember it later when we talk about it dealing with Islam and Muhammad. But Mecca, we knew how to get to places like Mecca and these other Arabic cities. But again, some of these prophecies were meant against them because we fled to these places, and they abused us, but we were still there and amongst us, but they were oppressing us in these places, no different than the king of Babylon was, doing to the whole of Jerusalem and taking them, mass majority into Babylon all the way, across the rivers and such like that. So again, these prophecies, these prophecies dealing with these, little no-name nations is part of how we're building the image of the diaspora of Israel, starting from such a long time ago, from lawful, legal things to being kicked out, such as we're reading here. There's another one we can get. Either want to get Jeremiah or Ezekiel. Let me read these ones real quick for y'all. Just to deal about, to touch on more so being kicked out. So I want to go to Jeremiah 25. Jeremiah 25, verse 12. Yes, I'll read this from verse 12, and then I'm going to have you read some of the more specific ones. But Jeremiah 25, verse 12, it says this, "And it shall come to pass when 70 years are accomplished that I will punish the king of Babylon." So again, we're still talking about the Babylonian exile and captivity of Israel and the nations involved with that, of Babylon, and that nation, thus saith the Lord, for their iniquity and the land of the Chaldeans, and I will make it a perpetual desolations. And I'm going to read verse 14, and then I'm going to have you read the other ones, Kanash. Verse 14, "For many nations and great kings shall serve themselves of them also, and I will recompense them according to their deeds and according to the works of their own hands." So again, the Most High is at this particular time in Jeremiah pronouncing a judgment against Babylon, 7 years, from the point and the date, as well as some of the other nations, which are going to include these Arab nations along with them. So with that being said, Kanash, you can read within this chapter, Jeremiah 25. You can read, you can read, start from verse 22.
Jeremiah chapter 25 and verse 22. "And all the kings of Tyrus, and all the kings of Zidon, and the kings of the isles, which are beyond the sea, Dedan, and Tema, and Buz, and all that are in the utmost corners, and all the kings of Arabia, and all the kings of the mingled people that dwell in the desert, and all the kings of Zimri, and all the kings of Elam, and all the kings of Medes."
Con, and that's good with that. So again, we're getting a grouping of what we're talking about of these Middle Eastern dwelling peoples that are going to receive this cup of wrath that the Most High says you're going to drink, because again, all these people had a hand in some form of fashion abuse to God's chosen people, us, Israel. They had some sort of partake in it, even though from the times of Solomon and times leading up, they were blessed through us, because of the businesses that we allowed them to make, trafficking and such like that. But it was all short lived, when it came to our burdens and such like that. It didn't mean nothing, during these times, during specifically this time with Babylonian exile. So to kind of sum up the point of time that we're in, we talked about so far the ancient legal dealings with Israel within the Middle East. We were doing the trades no different than what we were doing with Hiram, We were doing the same thing with, the Queen of Sheba and other nations, cities within the Arabian Desert. And then up into Babylonian captivity, some of these same people we had good business relationships with in journeyings started to abuse and turn against us. That we read about in Isaiah, Ezekiel, and Jeremiah, and the Most High pronouncing judgment on these nations, because again, we were amongst these people as well too, as well as what their inhabitants just did to us. So going with that forward, let's jump ahead of time into a few centuries, so that you guys just understand that we were exiled to these places, and also we just so happen to be situated in these places for trade's sake. Oh, the battery pack is dead. We'll continue to speak though. So going forward with this, let's go into some of the years right before Muhammad, right before the rise of Islam, rather, actually. So let me go right here. Ishmael, the Nabateans. That's what I want, actually. Yeah, it was going in and out. All right, so centuries before the rise of Islam, as we know, Israel again was dwelling amongst the Arabs and the Middle Eastern people. Now, if you guys did not know, what we called ourselves during these times, from the exile of Babylon as well as the northern kingdom Israel, there's a name designated for us, as they called back then, and that's actually the Mizrahi Jews. Jews that had traced their origins to different cities within the Middle East, such as Medina and Mecca, and some of these other ancient cities that really don't exist anymore, but Israel still being within the Arabian Desert. These of our brothers actually are called Mizrahi Jews, and this is a term that's very synonymous to as this the title of this article goes, Sephardic Jews. Now, this lesson's not really on them, but Sephardic Jews are Jews of the Middle Ages that dwelt within Iberia, which is like Spain and such like that. So the Jews over there, for the most part, are called Sephardic Jews. But again, now, since we have the foundation, Jews that happen to be within the Arabian Peninsula and desert for up until the 4th and 5th and 6th centuries after Christ, were called the Mizrahi Jews. So, this is a little article, that goes into that. These are some images and our some of our people that, have that claim of that, but these are Mizrahi Jews that are within a Middle Eastern culture. Culturally, Middle Eastern, but ethnically and by blood, still Israelites, Jews, that came from many different oustings, from Babylon all the way to the Roman captivities, our people dwelling there. I'm going to read this from you. This comes from myjewishlearning.com, and this is what the beginnings of these articles says. Although often confused with Sephardic Jews because they share many religious customs, Mizrahi Jews have a separate heritage. Mizrahi in Hebrew, or Eastern or Oriental Jews, come from Middle Eastern ancestry. Their earliest communities date from late antiquity, and the oldest and largest of these communities were in modern Iraq, which is Babylon. So our people that stayed in Babylon during the Babylonian captivity are still considered Mizrahi Jews, those furthest east of the northern Arabian Peninsula. Iran, which is Persia, and Yemen, which is, again, Sheba, the southern part of the Arabian Peninsula. All these people are considered, which is, close to our homeland, and our people there being there, Mizrahi Jews. And it says, today, most Mizrahi Jews live either in Israel, the state of Israel, Balfour Declaration, Israel, or the United States. Yeah, so that's that, and that's basically what we're talking about too, as far as dealing with our people exiled, during the time of the Babylonians, and it's crazy, just by some of the people in this image right here, how much they resemble our Latino and Native American brothers, over here. So, the physical or the visual phenotype of Israel, being mingled amongst the people, of the other nations and such like that, but being mingled amongst peoples that are more closer to what we were already dealing with in the Middle East, it becomes a no-brainer when you see our native brothers, and you see the similarities with so-called Arabs and so-called Egyptians or Africans and such like that. These are traits, in appearance that we share in antiquity and today as well too. So going from there, so the diaspora in that area is called Mizrahi. So let's go into some just some more details as far as dealing with Islam, and why some of our people are even caught up in the religion of Islam. Let me see where my article is that. Oh, yes. This is what I want to bring out. Or maybe this one. Is this one. Okay, so we're going to get into this shortly, but I'm going to give you guys some brief history right now. So, again, the trade routes. This is how Israel was doing business for a long time amongst the Arab people. Now, Jews of the 7th century Medina before Islam. So that's what I want to talk about right now. This particular major hub in the centuries before the rise of Islam, before the rise of Muhammad, when he made that based off of us. This particular city, Medina, is a very important city, as well as Mecca as well too. I'm going to continue reading from my notes a little bit, but okay, so our people, Jews of the 7th century Medina before Islam, this area is the southern region, the southwestern region of the Arabian Peninsula, which is historically called the Himyar, or modernly called Yemen, again, with some of the descendants of Keturah and Abraham, Joktan and such. The northern part is called Hijaz. Let me continue on real quick. We want to get about Muhammad. Let's read this. I'm going to read from the Jewish Encyclopedia now, real quick. This area right here where it says Jewish tribes at Medina. So now, the Jews had a very rich and flourishing settlement at Yathrib, which is Medina, that's the same place, and built strongholds in the city and vicinity. The principal families were the Banu Kaninuka, the Banu Kuriyaza, and the Banu al-Nadir. So again, these are basically Arabized Jews, and those three families are actually very important. You can get a lot of detailed articles and books on just these three particular families communities of Jews that lived in Medina, which is in the lower parts of the Middle East. Those families, again, Banu Kaninuka, Banu Kuriza, and the Banu Al Nadir. You know, these people should have descendants living there today. The latter two were known as the Al-Qanian because they traced their descent from Aaron. In the 4th century, Arab tribes from Yemen began to encroach upon the Jews in Medina. So Arabs from the deep south began coming up north and, you know, wanting to take upon the prosperity that, you know, when Israel puts their hand, you know, to the plow and doing works, Israel knows how to, you know, overcome or stay on top of the other nations, you know, of our enemies. So you have some other Arab tribes that are coming, you know, to live around, you know, the wealth. And these Arab tribes, they were divided into 2 clans. So again, this is Arabs, the Banu Aus and the Banu Khazraj. By calling in outside assistance and treacherously massacring at a banquet the principal Jews, these Arab clans finally gained the upper hand at Medina towards the end of the 5th century. So still before the rise of Islam, still before Muhammad's, you know, existence. For dates, see, you know, such and that. From this time, the Jews retired into the background for about a century, you know, 600 AD. For about 4 or 5 years before the Hijra, the Jews took an active part in the battle at Bauth between the Banu Aus and the Banu Khazraj, which were Arabs. The Banu Nadir and the Banu Khuzraji fought against the Arabs and were allied with the Banu Khazraj. The latter were defeated after a long and desperate battle. So again, these are a very brief summary of what our people were doing in Medina, in particular, in the Middle East, around the 4th century after Christ. So 400 AD. That's what our people were doing around there. You know, living. Good point to bring this again. Living off of the wealth and resources of these trade routes within the Middle East. Remember how I mentioned earlier when we talked about Ishmael and Hagar were found by a well in the wilderness of Shur? Now, our own forefather Abraham was building wells close to the area, but again, this is a custom that is important into establishing cities of trade in this particular desert. If wells, you know, and cisterns and such like that, or ground wells weren't found because they're there, they're just under the earth, under the water, you couldn't do the things that you could do living in the Arabian Peninsula. It's on the surface level, it's barren. But again, some of these natural wells have come up, and then man-made wells were actually made too. That was, again, and Medina. Medina is one of those places where in the middle of the desert, it's an oasis. It's an oasis where there's water there. People have planted, you know, palm trees, plants. They have flocks of cattle and sheep and, you know, camels and such like that. These places are sanctuaries, hence the word oases, for the people dwelling at the desert. Israel, before in the past, and as far as what we read right now, in the 4th century, and Medina had the upper hand in this particular city. So anybody that came through, you know, our people was, you know, taxing them, you know, on whatsoever trade routes, you know, traveling, water, supplies, all that. That's how we made, that's how we did business. That's how we made money. And that's how, again, we remained having the upper hand, dwelling amongst our enemies, dwelling amongst, you know, the other nations. Medina, as well as Mecca, was one of those places that our people had, you know, the upper hand, as the article said. Unfortunately, as the article also began to go into, we lost that. We first began losing that before Islam, when Arabs became, you know, nosy, you know, and curious, you know, working for us, under us actually, until they sedition, overcame us, and then we were put into a more humble estate. But again, all that couldn't be possible if, like our forefather Abraham, we weren't building and digging for these groundwaters, for these wells, to sustain and survive and do what we had to do as far as being cattle herders in these desert places. So that's how that happens again. And again, not to mention all the trade from frankincense and myrrh, incenses and spices and gold, some of the exclusive things that come in from the Arabian Peninsula and the waters leading to India. We had control over that type of trade, embargoes, taxes, and whatnot. So let's go a little bit further into the century, now dealing with Muhammad and Islam. So I'm gonna read from a little bit of my notes, and then we're gonna continue reading from the Jewish Encyclopedia. Actually, as a matter of fact, we'll read from the Jewish Encyclopedia first, and then we'll read my notes. So, from the Jewish Encyclopedia, this brief history says Muhammad's attitude towards the Jews of Medina. Again, this is an important place with this history. It is probable that the presence of the Jews of Medina did much to prepare the way for Muhammad's teaching of Islam. When the prophet, false prophet, at least not an Israelite prophet, first went to Medina, he was inclined to be friendly towards the Jews. They were included in the treaty between him and the inhabitants of Medina. He also made certain concessions to them on the ground of religion and adopted their Qibla, Jerusalem, in the hope of winning them to his cause. So some of those underlying things he had going down. At least as time had, went on, and he actually got schooled and educated. They, talking about us, Israel, they, however, ridiculed him and delighted in drawing him into arguments to expose his ignorance. Now, man, if that line doesn't sound like what you see at the Department of Public Social Services, today, and Israel clowning on people, probably calling Jakes ugly and stuff like that, I don't know, but that sounds like something Israel, would be doing. Delighted in drawing him to arguments to expose his ignorance, so that now going back on Muhammad, so that his conciliatory attitude, his kindness, was soon changed to enmity, which is, I don't like these niggas. A few Jews were converted to Islam, among them Abdallah ibn Salam, whom Muhammad called the servant of God, and whose conversion the prophet made such. And what it ultimately came down to, this subheader, Muhammad attacks Jews. Finally, after years of, ridicule to being called such names, finally Muhammad began to use actual violence towards the Medina Jews. After the Battle of Badr, a woman called Asma, said by some to be a Jewess, wrote satirical verses and was killed in her sleep, probably with Muhammad's consent. Not long before, Abu Afaq of the Banu Amr, who had been converted to Judaism, had been assassinated for having displeased Muhammad by writing verses ridiculing the new religion. Isn't that stuff that we do, diss tracks, rap tracks? This is stuff that we was doing back then. And not even to mention that we're going to get into one particular famous guy whose name is Samuel. This is a famous Jewish or Israelite poet that lived in the Middle East. And, some of the poems that he wrote. I don't have any of them, but you guys are going to be, I'm going to put you on knowledge of this guy. But again, stuff that this guy was doing and stuff that our people were doing that ultimately led to Muhammad killing us is, if you don't know who Israel is, it's us, man. It's us who you see in these streets and in the ghettos of America and all over the world. We was We was making satirical verses. We were doing the same things that we do today, just talking and speaking, and to some sense, it's schooling these people, and they didn't like it to the point to where, again, Muhammad, who was first, getting game for us, couldn't stand the reign of being a subservient nation and decided to kill our people yesterday and today. I'm gonna get back to this. Displeased Muhammad by writing verses ridiculing the new religion, Islam. Muhammad then seems to have decided to get rid of the Jews in a body since they were a constant menace to his cause. He began with the Banu Qainuqa, who were goldsmiths. Again, gold was an important thing of transport in this area, and lived by themselves in a fortified suburb. He first summoned them to accept his religion, and they refused. Soon a pretext was found for an open attack. A Muslim girl was insulted by a Jew of the Banu Qainuqa, an Arab girl. The Jew was killed by a Muslim, and the latter, in turn, was killed by the brothers of the murdered Jew. Muhammad immediately marched against the Banu Qainuqa and besieged them in their stronghold. After a siege of 15 days, they surrendered, and their lives were spared only at the urgent request of Abdullah ibn Ubay, the influential leader of the Arab opposition, whose pleading Muhammad dared not ignore. But being allowed to leave the country, they immigrated towards the north. Their departure was weakening the Jews, who, if they had been united, might have withstood Muhammad's attacks. So again, that's the history of that. And we have another article that says, section that says the fate of Medina Jews, and these are just Jews in Medina, not, to mention Mecca and some of the other, oases within the Arabian desert. But it's all, patterns, and it's all parallel. There were now left only the Banu Qurayza, and Muhammad soon found a pretext to attack them. Some of the Jewish exiles, chief among them being the above-mentioned Huyai, had stirred up the Quraysh and other Arab tribes against Muhammad, and they persuaded the Banu Qurayza to join them in their plans. Muhammad, however, succeeded in making the Jews and their Arab allies suspicious of each other. And the allies, who had been besieging Medina, suddenly departed in the midst of a storm, thus leaving the Qurayza unsupported. Muhammad marched against them, claiming to have received a special revelation to that effect, and laid siege to their fortress, which was a few miles southeast of the city, a suburb of Medina, pretty much. And, basically, long story short, Muhammad and Islam and his brethren, Ishmaelites, and, some Keturah descendants, made us shut up. They did not like our rap battles, our battle raps and our rap verses. They did not take a liking to that at all. So yes, with this conquest and with Muhammad and Islam as religion, Muhammad conquers the southern portion of Arabia, which is the Himyar, by warring with us Jews who didn't convert to Islam, who we instead ridiculed him with old ancient rap verses. And this was all in the 7th century, by the way. This all went down in the 7th century. So 600, from 660 BC up to, again, the 7th century, and then the years leading into the 8th century. That was that time frame when this was going down. So, with that being said, once Muhammad and his brethren did conquer us, he, made us subject to paying taxes to the Muslim state, which was, from there on expanded all over from Medina, the Arabian Peninsula, to Iraq or Babylon to the east, and all the way to, in the west to Spain. So again, we have lessons on the rise of Islam, but the Islamic empire, and the Arabic heads ruling them was a pretty sufficient sized empire back in the 7th century to the 11th century, 13th century. They, sustained for a short but good time, doing what they did, and enslaving us as well too, amongst other nations of people. Let's see. Oh, okay. So now, since we're in this time frame, we're going to go into again notable names and people. The first what I said was one of our many beloved writers, poets, rap stars back then. A man named. We can go to the PowerPoint. A man named Samuel ibn Adaya. And this again comes from the Jewish Encyclopedia, which is, great brief references and resources for things and people like this. But I'll read the first top of this. So Samuel ibn Adaya from the Jewish Encyclopedia was a poet and warrior who lived in Arabia in the first half of the 6th century. So, man, he was actually probably one of the main ones that was, began to do what he did in school and teach others to school Muhammad. This is the 6th century. This is right before Muhammad was doing his thing with Islam. His mother was of the royal tribe of Ghassan, while his father, according to some, was descended from Aaron, or according to others, from Kahin, son of Huran and progenitor of the Jewish tribes of Kuriaza and Nadir. Samuel owned a castle near Taima, 8 hours north of Medina. So this is one of the men in the suburbs of Medina that likely came from those Banu tribes that we mentioned, in this area. Again, this is an important Mizrahi Jewish cultured history, and this is one of those men of that time. So he owned a castle, dope, and it was situated on a high hill and was a halting place for travelers to and from Syria. You know what that means? He had business going on. If that's a halting place, that means he had the power to be like, all right, if you're going here, this is the price you're going to pay. This is what you're going to give me for allowing me to use, my road, my land and such like that. That was one of the things, land and territory that, is good for Israel to have, taking notes, our people. That's what he was doing, as well as, again, being a poet. I read that. We're not going to read that. We're going to well, this basically says that he was in actual, he was in some battles. Like, this was a man that actually fought in some wars, scrimmages around his time. But we're just going to get to the part to where he wrote poems because, a lot of us like music and a lot of us like lyrics. So we're going to read this section real quick. His poems. Samuel ibn Adaya's reputation as a poet rests upon one of the first poems in the collection called the Hamasa. Check that out. I'm about to later tonight or tomorrow. It is full of warlike vigor and courage and manifests a high ideal of honor. There is nothing in it to distinguish it from the work of any other Arabian poet, and it has been doubted rather whether Samuel was really its author, as the verse 6 upon which the compiler of the Hamasa bases his ascription to Samuel is not wholly convincing. Conjectures. Since, however, old, reliable authorities attribute parts of the poem, at any rate, to him, it is probable that most of it was written by Samuel ibn Adaya. Another poem attributed to him has been, published in Arabic and Hebrew with an English translation by H. Hirschfeld. So again, a contemporary for this time frame, 6th century, just on the rise of Islam. This man, Samuel ibn Adaya, his book of poetry is called the Hamasa, Hamasa. Check that out. I think that'll be good for us. So again, notable persons during that time. That's one. The last one that I have, and of course there's plenty more, but this man is just as important because this man helped establish a lot of things for us here at True Nation, at least for myself at True Nation, just on doctrine-wise. But this man, his name is Moses Maimonides. Moses Maimonides, and we're going to get, the article for him. Bam, look at that, it's right there. Moses Maimonides, he was a scribe. He was a Jewish scribe, and he lived, initially, he lived in Spain. He lived in 12th century Spain, so this is about 600 years after, our guy Samuel ibn Adiah. 600 years later, this man was born on earth within this regions. And again, his name is Maimonides in the 12th century. So he initially was born as a Sephardic Jew because he was from Spain. But again, at this time, Spain was already territory for the Islamic Empire. So he already knew Arabic. So he's already within the culture of, Arabs at this time because the Arabian Empire had expanded that far. So in the earlier part, that's where he's born, but he eventually spends the rest of his life and makes his travels as early as 10 to Morocco and Egypt, which is by far closer to the Arabian Peninsula and desert. And he has a number of works, one of them being, I believe it's called the Midrash. I believe it's called the Midrash Torah, actually. But I'm going to actually get that for you guys right now. But we're going to go over his works real quick because it's actually important because I'm not sure if anyone has ever heard of that in the Bible it has 613, 614 laws. As you come into the truth, that might be something you hear a lot. And that actually is attributed to this man right here, Moses Maimonides. What he did in his works, his magnum opus or his most famous work, it was called, we're going to read this for you guys right now. Where's his books at? Maimonides. It's got a difficult name to it, but his book is definitely there because that's what he's known for in the Mizrahi Jewish diaspora and the Middle Eastern Jewish, diaspora. That's what he's known for, his main book. And right now, man, I cannot find it. Let me go back to this article real quick. It's probably in here. We're just going to read this a little bit. Notable work, bam, right here. Notable works by Maimonides. Maimonides began writing on astronomy as a young man. One of his most important works in the field was about the Jewish calendar. This is important. Titled Laws of the Sanctification of the New Moon. The philosopher also wrote several medical treatises that were commissioned by Muslim nobles, such as Regime of Health on Asthma. His main contributions, however, were in rabbinical studies and philosophy, among them 3 enduring rabbinical works in which he systemized Jewish laws and belief. The first major work was the book of Commandments, in which Moses codified the 613 scriptural commandments found in the Hebrew Bible, or the Tanakh, actually Torah, and a work entitled Commentary on the Mishnah. So again, that's where that idea comes from. It actually comes from him, that the laws in the Torah is 613 laws. Him and his, codifying and his studying of the actual Torah and Tanakh, he came up with this in his one of his many books, doing that. And that book is actually called, I believe it's written on in this article too. I believe it's called, that's what it's called, the Mishnah Torah, and we're going to read from this article. One of the most important literary achievements of the Jewish Middle Ages, the Mishnah Torah contains detailed information about the Talmud, Jewish rulings, halakha, and interpretations of the Torah, organized in an accessible and transparent manner. So again, that's one of the books that he's mainly known for, as well as books that he's written on the Jewish calendar, specifically regarding the new moon. And lo and behold, that book actually does prove that the new moon is a crescent, which Israel has an issue with in a doctrine right now and understanding, between the dark moon and even the full moon. But himself and his works acknowledges the new moon in his book of calendars and astronomy of, our history being a crescent moon. That's in his works that he has. So again, this man, well, that's probably not what it looked like exactly, but this man, Maimonides, this was a very important figure in the 12th century Jewish diaspora, or Israelite diaspora in the Middle East, and for the world as well too, as far as his influence today. So yeah, two notable men of this diaspora, Maimonides and Samuel ibn Abdayah. Man. So to summarize, because that's pretty much from this dealing with the Middle Ages and our people in the Middle East. There's not really much to mention today with our people there. Our people still are there. Hopefully maybe we can get some more resources as far as what our people are doing there today. But from what I read from some articles prior, a lot of the Mizrahi Jews, by custom and practice, let alone Gentiles of our people over there, they have moved from that area. They have either moved, as they said, to the United States or back to Israel, desolate Israel, but it's said that that's some of the places that they had moved to out of cities like ancient cities like Medina, Mecca, and everything over there that's been modernized, and those names aren't really utilized no more. But again, hopefully you guys understand that as far as dealing with this subject, one of the main reasons us being a diaspora over here, so close to home but so far away, is because of the business that we were doing along these trade routes, for spices, gold, incense, frankincense in particular. We were dwelling amongst the other nations of these people doing this type of business, initially, as well as, eventually being exiled and running away from captivity, both in Babylonian, Roman, and some other, persecutions with the Arabs, themselves in Islam. We was being moved around and scattered around. But that's pretty much, the history of our people in this particular area, in the Middle East. And I hope that it's more than a starting point for some of you guys. I hope that it's, some apostleship, for us, because again, lessons like these are done with the intention to shine a light on the diaspora of Israel and to begin testing and trying these spirits by the Spirit so that we can get and fulfill prophecy, all of our people back home, and doing what's required. And more importantly, believing in Christ. Again, I didn't go in too much onto the Christian or Christianized Jews of this area, but that was also a big thing too. Some of the Jewish communities did become believers in Christ, and assimilated in the Byzantine and Christian empire as well. So again, that is that. Another Wednesday, World History. Hope you guys enjoyed. Make sure that you guys are getting fed throughout the other classes in the week and reading your Bibles, yourselves, and, studying, going back over these, informations yourselves and verifying for yourself and, explore a little, There's a whole world of information and books to begin bringing our people to repentance. And we need all the help. So again, thank you and good night.